everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to go over one of the most requested patterns on my channel. This is the Mia small zip around wallet from Miss Freckles Designs. Okay, so this little zip around wallet, this is probably one of the most popular styles of wallets to buy. So especially when you're younger and you're buying your first wallet, this is a very popular style. It holds everything. It keeps it all nice and small in compartment. It goes in a backpack or a small purse really well. On this, we have one major zipper. So we're gonna go all the way around like that. Now this design, we have two panels, one on the top on this side, one on the top on the back, and then we have a contrasting panel on the bottom. I'm using vinyl. You don't have to though. You can use quilt cotton. It will be easier. The vinyl here is going to be a little bit trickier than a thinner material. When we open the wallet up, we've got 4 card slots on one side, 4 card slots on the other, 2 big pockets in the middle, and then we have this little tiny zip pocket right here in the center. Look how cute that is. I've got some gold coins in there because apparently I'm a pirate. So, this wallet is an adaptation of a previous wallet she had. I'll show you. She originally had this wallet on her Etsy shop, which I did try and I had a hard time with, again, because of my skill level. She actually revamped this pattern and turned it into this one here, which is easier and it gives you more options. So this is option A, where you have the tops as one fabric and then the bottom as another fabric. You could also make this just with one piece of fabric. So especially if you don't have a directional print on your fabric, you can just use one piece of fabric here for the whole unit. And that will actually make this part down here a lot easier because this will be a lot thinner. Now I want to show you, I made 2 versions so far. Both of these, you know, are themed. They're so fun. This is like my snacks one when I go to Disney, and this is like my snacks cash, right? This is my budget so that I don't spend too much on the snacks. And this is just like a fun little gamer wallet. I mean, how cute is that? Look at that. I will have links for where I got everything down in the description of this video. Now let's talk about difficulty level. Is this a beginner project? I mean, if you are really determined to make this and you're a beginner, you can do it. Most of it is very simple. I mean, that's the beauty of these wallets. It takes very little material. You don't need yards and yards of fabric. It's very small amount of material. Most of the pattern, super easy. Super, I mean, you're just gonna fly through it at all. It's nice and clean, makes sense. I mean, the pattern makes sense, but everything is very simple. There are 2 steps, and those are just adding the lining to the exterior. You pretty much have to sew on the lining to the exterior that already has the zipper on it. And as you can see, this does not lie flat, right? So you're gonna be sewing it. I mean, you're gonna add these on at the end, but it's not going to be totally flat when you sew it, which makes it a little challenging. Now, I'm going to walk you through that in detail with lots of tips, lots of tricks, lots of encouragement. But this is my big thing for this wallet. Finish it. If you start it, finish it. Even if it gets rough, even if you see stitches, even if it's not exactly the way you want it to be and you feel like, oh, it's just not working and I'm just gonna throw it out. Don't. Finish it. Just finish it, because I promise you on both of these wallets, I have a hard time with it too. It's hard to sew some of these curves and I almost quit both times. But I'm so glad I didn't, because now you cannot see any of the things I was struggling with. It looks perfect. It looks like it was easy for me, okay? So finish it. If you start this one, you gotta finish it, promise me. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comments section. I will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. So just check the bottom of the video. They'll be listed right there. They'll also be in the description right underneath this video. So if you go over here, there's a little arrow. It'll drop down more info on the video, and that's in the description. That's where you're gonna find all the links, and you're also gonna find all of the timestamps. All right, let's get started. Okay, so you don't actually need a whole lot of material to make this wallet, but you might not have some of it. So for the exterior, you're gonna need about a fat quarter. Now, I'm doing option A, so there's gonna be a 2 different tops and then a bottom. So I have this beautiful rose fabric here from Tula Pink. From the contrasting fabric, if you're doing option A, you just need a small cut. about 7 inches by 4 inches or larger. So again, if you have scraps of vinyl, that's fine. You could also use quilt cotton here or cotton canvas, anything like that. And then from the lining, you're going to need at least a half a yard. Next up is something you might not have. This is a non-woven interfacing. This is Pellon 809 Decor Bond. Now, this is kind of like Pellon 808, which is craft fused, which is very paper-like, except it's not quite as paper-like. I do suggest you stick with the pattern and try to find yourself some of this Pellon 809. If you don't have it and you just really want to make it, but you have the craft fuse, which is the Pellon 808, I think you would be okay using that. But this, it's hard to tell the difference between this and 808. It's a little bit more plush and not quite as crispy. And you're gonna need at least 1/4 yard of this 809. I would suggest you get 1 yard just so you have extra for future projects, because it's one of those things, you might not always have it, but when you need it, you have it, it's good. You don't have to go shopping, you know what I mean. And then next we have some heavy stabilizer. You're gonna need about 1/4 yard of this as well. This is Decoville Heavy. The pattern also mentions using woven interfacing, so like Pellon SF101. That's really just if you're doing option A and you're gonna be using quilt cotton for this bottom piece here. Since I'm using vinyl, it doesn't need any extra interfacing. But if you were using a piece of quilt cotton for the bottom contrasting piece, you're gonna wanna beef that up just a bit more, so you would use your woven interfacing on that. Okay, the only real hardware you have today is zippers. Now, the pattern does suggest a number 5 zipper. This is a number 5 zipper, and the number goes with the width of the zipper teeth. So you see these zipper teeth right here from one side to the other of the silver part. That's 5 millimeters. So the pattern suggests you have a number 5 zipper for the exterior portion, and then there's a little tiny zip pocket inside, and for that one you want to use a number 3 zipper. I do suggest you do that because a number 3 zipper is more narrow and it just takes up less space. However, I don't actually have any number 3 zippers on me, so I'm going to be using a number 5 zipper for the exterior and also for the coin pouch. It does work, but it is best if you use a number 3 zipper inside. And then I just have 2 cute little zipper pulls for the exterior and also for the inside. One thing I want to suggest when you're doing this, try not to use a zipper pull that's really, really big for the exterior zipper. At one point, our zipper pull is going to be kind of tucked inside, and then we're going to do all the sewing, and then we're going to pull it out with a string, and you're not going to have the biggest hole to pull that zipper pull out. So when I was doing this one here, you can see it's a very small hole down here that we leave to pull out our zipper pull. And this was just, I mean, I had to really finagle it to get it out. So if you're using one of those giant zipper pulls, it's not going to come out and you're going to have some issues. I mean, you can get around it, but I would suggest a smaller zipper pull for the exterior of the wallet. Okay, so let's talk about all the other stuff. You're gonna need a lot of different ways to mark and stick things. So to start with, obviously, lots of clips. Lots and lots and lots of clips, especially these curved Wonder clips. These are gonna be really helpful at holding everything together on this kind of curvy, odd-shaped wallet. Beacon 3-in-1 glue. Now, for the top thread, I will be using this thicker top stitching thread. And then for the bobbin thread, I have my Joann's Gutermann. The bobbin thread will be seen in the lining. So think about that now. If you've got some crazy black or red thread and you're like, well, I'm never gonna see it, you will. So make sure you're using a bobbin thread that you're okay seeing on the inside of your wallet. I have a lighter. If you're using polyester thread, you're gonna want a lighter here so we can keep our stitches nice and clean. We're gonna be tying some little knots, burning those little edges, things like that. So a lighter is gonna be helpful. I've got some Dritz 1/4 inch wash away tape. I'm probably gonna wanna use more of this. Then I have my seam ripper and stiletto. I have a fabric glue stick, a marker for writing on vinyl, a marker for writing on fabric that is erasable, a fabric marker that is erasable. That's what you want. And then I also have a chalk marker just in case I have to draw a line on the exterior fabric and I'm a little worried about using this one. I know chalk rubs off really easily. I do have some hand stitching needles here. You might not need these, but some of the pattern can get a little tricky, and I just want to make sure that if you're having trouble with your machine, you can use a hand needle. Have that option available. You're going to want to finish this wallet. It's adorable. You're going to love it. But if you can't finish it with the machine, do it with your hand needle. And then I have like really thick thread. So this is like quilting thread, just anything, any type of thread that's really thick or very, very strong. You could even use this thread here. Something that is thick and strong, and it is a bright color that you can see. At one point, we're going to be tying this to our zipper, and we're going to be using this to pull the zipper out in the end. You don't want it to break, and you don't want to not be able to see it. So I have this bright green, thicker, kind of a mess of a thread. And then I have my sewing machine needles. These are Schmetz 8012 Microtex needles. Obviously, I go through a lot of them. My scissors, I've got my little thread snips for the machine, and then I've got my fabric scissors here, which are Kai scissors. And then this is the one tool many of you might not have. I know I didn't, I had to buy it. This is a quilting grid ruler, and it is metric. So it has millimeters and centimeters. The pattern is written in metric, but the inches are given. However, some of the inches don't quite convert to our quilting rulers. So I found this helpful. You don't need it. But if you feel like you're going to be following more patterns written overseas and written in the metric system, why not? Just why not have this for when you need it? Okay, so let's go through the pattern pieces kind of one by one. So since I'm doing option A, we're going to have two larger rectangles. They do give you the measurements in the pattern. These are bigger than they're going to be in the end. So if you have pattern placement, try to kind of think about having it more towards the bottom edge and centered like this, because I'll show you in a minute, but it might not be dead center. So I have two cuts that I'm going to use for the tops of my wallet. And then I have the pattern piece here that I use to trace the bottom of the wallet. So this is just going to be the base that's going to go hugging around the wallet just like that. Now, if you're using quilt cotton here, you're going to also want a piece of interfacing for the quilt cotton. So this could be your SF101 here. Since I'm using vinyl, I don't need to use this. But I want to show you what we're going to do. We're pretty much going to sew these two pattern pieces together. And the reason there's two rectangles here instead of just one long one is because if you have a directional print, you don't want it to be right side on one side and then upside down on the other side. This way it's the right side on both sides. So you're going to sew these two together just like that. And before we attach this piece, we're actually going to use this piece of the template here. So this is one cut here, and it is a little tricky. It's very thin, I know. If you want to print this out on cardstock paper, so it's a little bit thicker, that's probably a good idea because this is very loosey-goosey, but I'll show you how I trace it. And then after we sew them together, we're going to use this to trace the outline of our fabric piece. And once that's done, so let's just put this on here and pretend like we just cut that out and we traced it, then we will attach this bottom piece like that. I'll walk you through it, but I just want you to understand, you're gonna wanna cut this pattern piece. You cut out the inside, but you leave this really skinny piece here too. And this also helps you figure out pattern placement, right? So if you wanna make it a little bit higher, a little bit lower, you can do that. Next up are our card slots for the wallet. You're gonna have two pieces of this. This is just my quilt cotton here. I haven't applied any interfacing to anything yet. It's very detailed on how we do that, so we're gonna go through all of that together. So I have two cuts of quilt cotton from the card slot compartments. Also from my lining, I have my interior main panel. This is just the inside of the wallet. And then I have 4 cuts of my zipper pocket. So you can see it's a very small zipper, but you're going to need 4 cuts for the zipper on the inside of the wallet. And then I have 4 cuts of my lining material for the dividers. So that's just gonna separate it all. Let me show you. So let's look at this here. So you see these right here on the sides, these are the card slots, which are this big piece here. And then here in the middle, we have these zipper pockets. You have 4 of those zipper pocket cuts. And then here are your dividers, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's where your dividers are. This is how it all comes together. So now you have a whole bunch of other cuts of just interfacing. You're gonna have 1 cut from your Decoville Heavy. This is all the Decoville Heavy you use. You don't use a whole lot of it, but you definitely want this. And then the rest of these are gonna be cuts from 809. So we have the interfacing here. This is for the lining. We have the dividers. We have these smaller interfacings here, and these are for the card slots. We don't want to attach interfacing to this entire strip here because we want to keep it as thin as possible. So we only attach them where we need them. And then we have interfacing for the zipper pockets as well. So you just make sure you have all this. It all applies very easily. You just want to have it all cut out before you go. This isn't one of those patterns where you're just going to kind of apply the interfacing to everything and then cut out your pattern pieces. There's very specific spots for all of this, and the point of that is to keep the material very thin so that you can actually sew it together. All right, so let's first build our exterior and then we'll start applying the interfacing to everything and then we can get into construction. So remember, this is your wallet. If you have a directional print, and this is a directional print because it's got little drippies and they drip down, right? So that's, I mean, it could drip up. It's Alice in Wonderland. It can go anywhere. So I want the drippies to both go down. So the bottom is going to be the seam in between. And you can see they're not exactly the same size. You don't have to be too precise with these rectangles. We're going to trim it down anyways. It just needs to be bigger than this once they're together. That's all. Okay, so we're going to take these two rectangles and lay them right sides together. You can use some clips or pins here, whatever is easier. And we're just going to clip along their bottom edges. And now we can sew along that edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these sewn together, you can grab an iron and let's just give it a good press. So I press it when it's all sewn, just like that first. And then we can just press this up like that. And then I am going to press the seam open on the back. So I'm just going to flip it to the back, use my fingers to press open the seam, and then use the iron to flatten that out. All right, once you have that done, you're gonna grab your heavy stabilizer and we're going to attach this to the back of our quilt cotton. Now this quilt cotton doesn't have anything else fused onto it. Again, keeping it thin. So we're gonna center this. What you can do is you can definitely just fold your Decovil Heavy or your Peltex, whatever really thick interfacing you're using, just fold it in half. And then you can mark the midpoint on these longer edges if you'd like to line that up with your seam here. Okay, so now I have the little midpoints marked here. I can just kind of lay this over it and make sure that the midpoint matches up on the seam on the back of my quilt cotton here. There we go. And then kind of move it left or right, depending on where you need it. Remember, we do still have to cut off a little bit on the edges over here, so don't have it all the way on the edge. You need some extra space on both sides. So just center it to the best of your ability. If you want, before you fuse it, you can grab your little template here. And what we're gonna do is just wrap it around that Decovil Heavy and make sure, yeah, that's good. Might move it just a scotch to the right. All right, I'm gonna grab some scrap fabric and I'm going to cover the back of it because I wanna fuse it a little bit from the back first and then I'll fuse it from the front. So I covered it up. I'm not moving my Decovil Heavy. It is where it is. It's where I want it to be. Everything is lined up. So that's staying in place. And then I'm gonna make sure my iron is really hot and I'm gonna turn the steam up all the way. And a lot of steam is gonna help that Decovil Heavy fuse to that quilt cotton. Nice and hot and steamy. And it fuses best from the right side of the fabric that you're fusing it to. But since I have very specific placement right now, I want to make sure that I get it fused from the back first. And it doesn't have to be fused perfectly from the back, just enough. So now it's just stuck there enough that I can flip it over and I don't have to worry about it moving around on me. And now I'll fuse it from the front side of my quilt cotton. Okay, so now we have our Decovil Heavy fused to that fabric. And again, if you're doing option B, you don't have to worry about any of this. You just cut it out as one piece of fabric. So now I'm going to grab my little skinny template here, and all you're gonna do is you're just gonna kind of wrap it around that Decovil Heavy, just like this. Now, it doesn't have to be totally perfect because we're pretty much just gonna wrap this around the Decovil Heavy later. So if it's a little bit bigger, that's fine. It's better that you cut your quilt cotton a little bit on the bigger side rather than the smaller side. So what I do is I just kind of hug this strip around the edges that I'm looking at, and then I just trace that 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is it's just what this is. It's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's all we're doing. We're just tracing out that little bit. So you don't have to worry about the whole thing fitting exactly around your Decovil Heavy. Only the edge that you're working on. So I just kind of move it around as I'm going. And then don't forget to trace out these little tabs down here. All right, once you have that traced out, now all you have to do is grab your scissors and then just cut along the line you just traced. All right, there we go. Now our outer panel is all ready to go. Let's go ahead and attach the interfacing to the rest of our panels, and then we'll continue building this by adding the bottom piece and then adding our tag and everything like that. So remember, if you're using a quilt cotton or a canvas cotton, anything like that that's a little bit thinner for your contrasting piece and you're doing option A, make sure you use your SF101 and fuse that centered on that just like that. I have vinyl, I don't need to use it. All right, so now let's add the interfacing to the lining main panel. So I'm just going to iron this out a bit first. And then you're gonna take that interfacing, so that is the 809, and with glue side down, so glue side is the shiny side, glue side down, just center it. You can get a ruler out and center it if you'd like, or you can just eyeball it. You might find it easiest to grab a pressing cloth, which is just a scrap piece of fabric for me, and then give it a good press. And you're gonna wanna use steam. So just like I did with the Decoville Heavy, I'm gonna press it a little bit on the back with my scrap fabric, and then I'm gonna flip it over and press it from the front, because it sticks best when it's fused from the front of the fabric. So for the interfacing on the card slots, you're gonna wanna use the template for that piece. So on here you can see it says like apply interfacing 1, interfacing 1, interfacing 1, interfacing 2 on the bottom. And what you wanna do is grab a marking tool and you're gonna wanna mark the lines for where this goes. So what I do is I just line this up right over my fabric and then I just shift it a little bit. Like for example, this time I'm gonna shift it a little bit to the right and I'm gonna make sure it's lined up perfectly on the top and the bottom so it's not crooked or anything. And then I'm just gonna mark the lines on the edge of the fabric. So there's a line I need to mark. Okay, and then right here is a line right where it cuts down. And then here's another section I'll be adding interfacing like that. And then I'll have another one down here, my third one. And then I have one all the way down on the bottom. There we go. So then I will just take my pattern piece and shift it to the left, lining up the top and the bottom and making sure it's straight. And then I'll do the same thing. I'm gonna mark my lines just right on the edge. Well, I guess I didn't need to mark that line up there. I'm gonna mark these lines so that I know where I need to put my interfacing pieces. And you can definitely take this pattern piece and fold along those lines and just mark straight lines all the way across the back of this if that's easiest for you. But I find these little ticks in the seam is fine. So go ahead and do that for both of your card slot panels. So once you have all those little ticks marked, now we're going to fuse on our interfacing pieces. So remember, we're going to be using the interfacing number 1 and the interfacing number 2. Just so you don't forget, the number 2 pieces always go on the very bottom. They're just a little bit smaller and they go all the way down on the bottom. So starting with number 1, this is going to go right above the little notched area and it's going to be centered. So it might help for you to grab a ruler and just line it up along your tick marks and then line up your interfacing piece so that you can tell exactly where it's supposed to go and that it's centered. Okay, so just like we've been doing, I'm going to place my interfacing where I want it, and then I'm going to grab my pressing cloth, scrap piece of fabric, push it right over it, and then fuse it from the back. And then I can just flip this over and fuse it from the front as well. And remember, this is the only interfacing on this quilt cotton card slot. Okay, so the next one is just going to be below the marked line there. And I have it centered. And I'll cover it with my scrap. And then just press it from the back. And then I'll press it from the front. All right, now I have the third interfacing number 1 applied in between my tick marks on the sides. So you can see how they're all evenly spaced out, right? None of them should be right next to each other. So I will fuse this on the same way I did the other 2. And then for the last piece, don't forget that that is the interfacing number 2. So it's just a little bit smaller than the other one, just a little bit, not quite as tall. So we're going to interface that the same way, but remember, it's just right above the bottom edge of your card slot pockets. All right, so that is how you attach the interfacing to one of your card slot panels. It is a little bit more work than just interfacing the whole thing, but with card slot pockets, they have a tendency to get very bulky very quickly because we fold them up so much. I mean, this is a bigger piece of fabric and we're gonna make it a very small piece of fabric by the time we're done with it, and then we have to do 2 of them in a small wallet. You know, we just wanna keep it thin. So repeat this for your other card slot pocket. So next step are the zipper pocket interfacing. So you're gonna have 4 cuts for your zipper pocket, and then you have 2 cuts of zipper pocket interfacing. So you're only gonna do this on 2 of them. So they are gonna go all the way to the short edges, but you're gonna want about 1/4 inch on the top and the bottom. Again, you can get the ruler out and you can measure it, or you can just eyeball it. So I'm just going to lay these down. And like I've been doing, I will cover them on the back and press them, and then press them from the front as well. And I should probably give these other pieces a press. So these other 2 pieces of zipper pockets over here, they're not interfaced with anything. And what interfacing does is that it provides a lot of thickness and it provides more structure, so you don't have to worry about, you know, instead of your piece of fabric being all loosey-goosey, it's more firm. But the nice thing too about interfacing is that it prevents fraying. So that's where you have to be very gentle with all your pieces while we're working on them. Because the more fraying we have on our quilt cotton pieces, the harder it's going to be to keep everything straight. It's going to be more frustrating to work with. So gentle fingers to prevent fraying. Okay, so for the zipper now we have 2 that have the interfacing and 2 that do not. And then last we have the dividers, and we have 4 dividers and 4 interfacings for them. And these ones are not centered. They're actually going to be 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom. So not like this, but more like this. See? So you can get your ruler out and do 3/4 of an inch from the bottom, and then centered along the short edges as well. Just like that. All right, so I fused them all a bit on the back, and now I'm just going to fuse them from the front as well. Because the last thing you want is your interfacing peeling up while you're working on your project. You have enough other things to think about. You just want this to stay put, you know? All right, go ahead and put these to the side and let's start sewing it. All right, so the first thing we want to do, if you're doing option A, which has that little contrasting bottom, is that we want to fold these long raw edges up wrong sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So the easiest way to do that is to grab a ruler and mark a line on the back of your contrasting piece that is 3/4, so 3/4 of a way up from these longer raw edges. All right, so I have my 3/4 of an inch marks here. Now if you're using quilt cotton, you can just press the raw edge wrong sides together up to meet that marked line, and now you'll have a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here. Since I'm using vinyl, I'm gonna grab some tape, and I'm gonna use tape to help with this. I could also probably just use clips, but tape is just so handy, you know? Okay, so I have my tape. I aligned it just below the marked line, so it's just below that 3/4 of an inch line, because I still want these raw edges to come up wrong sides together, and I want the raw edge to meet that marked line. And then as it does that, I'm just going to push it down over that tape. And now I have my seam taped in place at 3/8 of an inch. So do this for both of the edges here. And to be honest, this tape is not the strongest tape in the world. So you might also want to grab a couple clips and just clip it down just in case. Just for a moment. We don't need this to last too long, just long enough to sew it on at the machine. Okay, now grab your exterior piece. Again, remember this is all for option A. If you're doing option B, you're just gonna skip all of this. So grab your exterior piece and grab your contrasting piece, and we're just gonna line it up right over the center. So what this does is it covers up that seam. You just line up the notches in the sides perfectly, and then we stitch it down, and it's adorable, right? That's adorable. So this is where you're gonna have to remove those clips. And it should line up pretty easily. We used pattern pieces for all of this. We shouldn't have anything wonky going on. Just get it there. All right, and now if you're using vinyl, depending on your vinyl, this might be a little sticky. And if you notice, as you sew along these edges, you can kind of like shift it. So if you sew down one way here and then sew the other way, you might find your vinyl is kind of twisted. So you could use a silicone foot here. I probably will put a silicone foot on my machine just because I have done that on every one of these wallets. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna go along these folded edges, and we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that's just gonna hold this whole thing in place. All right, isn't that cool? So now you have a pretty good idea of what your wallet's gonna look like. You can just kind of fold it in half, and look how adorable that is. Okay, I forgot to show this in the beginning, but this is my little leather bag tag, and I'm going to attach this to the outside of my wallet. So this is a good time to kind of look at your prints and see where you want to do that. This one is pretty well centered, so I think I'm going to put it over here. So I am just going to grab some tape and just get this as flat as possible. If you find this is a little bubbly down here, don't worry about it. It's all going to be folded and curved. You won't even notice it later. So I'm going to grab a little piece of tape, put it on the back, and then I'm eyeballing this. I'll use a ruler. So I centered it along the horizontal part, and then I just put it up 1/2 inch above my contrast. And I'm just going to top stitch this at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So you may have noticed I did not backstitch on my tag, and that's because what I'm going to do is actually pull my bobbin thread up so that it pulls that top thread to the back, and I just pull it out. And this is a trick we've been doing on a few different patterns lately, and this allows us to tie off the thread on the back, and that way we don't have any of that kind of a messy back stitching or anything. It just looks like one clean stitch all the way around. But on the back, to secure it, we tie it in some pretty good knots. So you should have 4 strands back here. You can tie 2 knots using 2 strands each, or you can use all 4 strands and just tie 1 knot, which is what I'm doing. And I'm going to tie it about 3 times. This is the back. This isn't going to have any impact on anything. So there we go. I tied it a few times. Now I'm just going to trim those threads. Don't even have to trim them that close because, again, this is the back. We don't have to worry about them. All right, so let's take a look at this. You see I already have some fraying. This is what I'm saying. You got to be careful with your quilt cotton. It likes to fray. But when we close the wallet, this is what our wallet's going to look like. This part should already get you excited because that's super cool, right? I love it. So let's put this to the side and work on the lining. Grab your main lining panel and flip it so that it's wrong side up. Grab your scissors, and we're going to cut little slits around these curved edges. Now I cut until I'm about an 1/8 inch, maybe just less than an 1/8 inch away from my interfacing. I don't cut all the way to the interfacing. So we cut close to it, but we're not touching it. The scissors are not touching the interfacing. We're going to do this for all 4 corners, just cutting slits so that we can easily fold this down without having to worry about too much bunching. All right, this is where I like to use a glue stick. You could definitely use other types of glue. I feel like the Beacon 3-in-1 is a little messy for this. You don't want it to get too thick with glue. So this is where we're going to take the glue stick, and we're going to just glue around these edges. So I glue on the actual interfacing, and I like a glue stick for this. I feel like Beacon 3-in-1 glue would be a little messy here, so I just do one spot at a time, and then you're going to take your quilt cotton and you're going to just fold it over your interfacing. So that's the nice thing about this pattern, is that the interfacing really determines the structure of everything. So as long as you cut your interfacing well, you shouldn't have too much of a problem with your sizes. And if some of your corners are a little messy, like they're not quite grabbing the glue, that's okay. We'll go back to those. Just try to get all of your fabric wrapped around your interfacing piece. Okay, so I have this completely glued around it, and now I'm going to go around in any spots that are kind of lifting up, like some of these fold over edges around the corner. I'm going to add a little bit of extra glue there. Maybe some spots I just didn't add enough glue. You just want all of this to stay put really, really well. Because again, it's one of those things where it's just going to make other steps easier. You won't have to think about making sure these raw edges aren't peeking through. If you have any spots like the corners where they're still trying to kind of lift up just a tiny bit, go ahead and grab some clips and add the clips while the glue dries. And if you're using a glue stick, it doesn't take too long for this glue to dry. Okay, so now you can see when you have your lining piece, it's just one nice piece of fabric, no raw edges, and this is how we will eventually just plop it into the wallet and sew it on. So once your glue is dry, go ahead and remove your clips. Grab the pattern piece for the interfacing for the interior panel, and it should be the exact same size as your fabric now that we wrapped it around there. And what you're going to do is you're going to fold on one of the lines just like that. So I folded on the top line, and I'm going to line it up with the bottom edge here, and make sure you're using a fabric marker. This is a fabric air erasing marker. I have used it tons of times. I know that it does erase. Or you could use a chalk pencil here. That would also be good. And we're going to trace that line onto our lining fabric, just like that. Now I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to mark another line. So we're marking 2 lines that are 2.1 centimeters wide. This is why it's just easier if you just use your template and do it that way. There we go. So these should be good. All right, so now I have my 2 lines marked on here. So now what we want to do is sew a little bit on the edge here, just around these 2 marked lines. So we're sewing on the folded edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And each little bit that we sew is going to be 4 centimeters long. So what I did was I took my ruler and I centered it with these marked lines, and I just made little tick marks on the bottom and the top of each one of these. Tick to tick, it's 4 centimeters long. So from there to there, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. For this, I will be leaving the tails of the bobbin and the top thread nice and long so that I can pull them to the back and tie them off so I don't have to do any back stitching here. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, then just make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end of each one of these little bits that you're sewing. Okay, so you can see I have all these tails hanging off. What I'm going to do is flip it to the wrong side, and then I'm just going to use my bobbin thread to gently pull. And then I can see a small loop pop up. That's my top thread. I see it popping up on the back here. And then I'm going to take my stiletto, very gently pull that top thread to the back. And the goal is to get all of the threads on the back side of this lining piece. Once you have them all there, all you have to do is take the bobbin and top threads and then give them 2 or 3 knots each and then cut the tails down. You don't have to worry about burning anything here since this won't really be seen, but you can definitely burn the tails if you're using polyester thread. You can do that if you'd like. That will just secure it a little bit more. So once you have this done, you have your little side stitches over here, you have your lines marked. Let's place this lining to the side for just a moment. Now I'm going to bring the iron back and we're going to fold our card slots. So let's just start at the top. The top is going to be this kind of fatter spot up here. We're going to take the edge right above the top of our interfacing and we're going to fold it down wrong sides together. So I like to just kind of pick it up, tuck it, make sure the edges are lined up really well. Don't like fold it like that, you know, get everything squared up, keep everything super straight. And then grab your iron and press along that edge. Okay, so we flip this right side over. Now on the bottom edge of that interfacing, we're going to fold them right sides together. So that is just right along that little notched edge here. It should just wrap right around your interfacing. It shouldn't be that difficult to keep this all straight if you made sure to keep your interfacing straight when you applied it. There we go. All right, so you can see I'm looking at the wrong side of the rest of my strip here. So now I'm just going to fold the whole thing back, wrong sides together, and now I'm hugging around the top of this interfacing piece right here. So I can just kind of push it up and get it really straight. Make sure the whole line doesn't start, you know, twisting and turning. And then give it a press. All right, and now we're gonna flip this edge right sides together. So we're looking at the wrong side of it now. And we're gonna pull all the way up till it's at the bottom of that interfacing. It just wants to stop on its own. Making sure to line this up with those inner edges that we already have. And then press along the bottom here. And just like before, we're going to just kind of keep accordioning this down. So now we're going to go to the top, this edge right here of this interfacing. Just fold them wrong sides together. You can kind of just push it to the top. Here we go. You should see some nice card slots coming here. Now let's fold this right sides together, just to the bottom of that interfacing that we were working on before. We haven't messed with this bottom interfacing piece yet. And give it a press. And now for the last one, same thing, fold it wrong sides together along the top edge of that interfacing. And this bottom edge should pretty much meet the bottom edge of the bottom piece here. Once you do this, it all should kind of just line up into this nice little rectangle. If it's not perfect, that's okay. You can trim it. But this one actually ended up pretty nice. There we go. Nice and flat. And if you want, after you press it and it's really hot, grab a ruler or something heavy, maybe a heavy book, and just lay it over the top of it. And as it cools, it'll cool really crisp and flat. Because as it's hot, once it starts cooling, it likes to kind of puff up again. But if you put something over it and hold it down while it cools, then it will stay very, very flat. So there we go. Look how cute that is. Let me grab a credit card real quick. All right, so here is a card that is the size of a credit card, and we put it in. There we go. It'll look just like that. So you can just try to kind of test them out, make sure they're all not too deep. Perfect. Love it. So now grab your other card slot pocket and repeat that process with the other one. Alrighty, so now we have 2 of our card slot pockets pressed. And what we want to do now is we want to go over all of the folded edges. So just the folded pieces of fabric. We have 4 on each one of these. We want to sew over each of those at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those top stitched, you're going to find the midpoint on the bottom raw edge and on the top raw edge. So remember, this is still just one piece of fabric. So easiest if you just fold it in half. And I'm going to use a marker here to mark that midpoint. There's that on the bottom and then also on the top. Do this for both of your card slot pockets. All right, now take both of these raw edges and fold them right sides together and match up those midpoint marks. So the whole reason we did that is so that we don't sew these together at an angle and then it's all wonky. So match up those midpoint marks, clip at those midpoint marks or pin if you're using pins here, and then clip along the entire edge. There we go. So I'm gonna do this for both of them. Okay, now let's sew along both of these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have those sewn, what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna press the seam so that it's open. So we're just pressing these 2 flaps away from each other. So you can see I'm just pressing one up like that, and then I'll flip this over and press the other one up. So pretty much we're just pressing the seams so that they're wrong sides together along their own piece of fabric, or their own side of the fabric. Okay, so now you're gonna take your card slot pocket and flip it right side out, just like that. And now we have to kind of refold everything, which can get a little tricky. You do have to kind of finagle it, but you're gonna refold everything. So remember that top edge is still the top edge. And then just press along this bottom edge here. And the bottom of this should just be that seam that we just made. So get it all positioned, straighten it out. If you kind of have to pull on things, finagle things, that's okay. And then give it a good press once it's exactly the way you want it. So do this for both of them. I'll show you again. We're just gonna take it and flip it right side out. I'm gonna find the top edge, and the top edge is the widest part. And then I'm just gonna kind of pull each of the card slots up and over. And I know this part here gets a little weird, so you just have to force it to go where you need it to go, and then just finger press this bottom edge really well. And since that bottom edge gets so bulky, I'm gonna add some clips here to just hold it in place so that I don't have to worry about these kind of rolling around on me. So now we're going to top stitch from the second fold. So I'm counting this top edge here as the first fold. The second fold all the way down, we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edge of this inner part here. So not all the way here. We're going to do 1/8 of an inch in from the edge of this inner part from the second pocket all the way down to the bottom. I will be back stitching at the beginning and the end of these seams. All right, once you have that stitched in place, we're going to cut right along the edge. So we're not cutting into the inner edge of our pockets here. We're just going to cut right along it all the way to the top edge of the bottom pocket. So it might be easiest if you start like this. I'm going to cut this background fabric here straight into it all the way to the edge of the raw edges of the inner fabric and just lining it up with the top edge of this bottom pocket right here. And then I'm just like tracing, I'm just cutting right next to that inner raw edge all the way up, just like that. So you see now you have like this little notch coming out. It's exactly what we want. We're gonna do this with the other side as well. So just like before, I'm just going to cut into this back fabric and just lining it up with the top edge of the bottom pocket. And then I just kind of slide my scissor in here and I'm just cutting right next to that inner fabric, but I'm not cutting, you know, all of the card slot fabric. I'm just cutting the background fabric. See? And now we have a nice little card slot pocket. Do the same thing with the other one. Okay, now we're gonna grab that lining fabric and hopefully you still have your lines marked. If you don't, go ahead and grab your template and remark your lines. Because what you're gonna do is take your card slot pocket and you're just gonna line up the bottom edge of your card slot pocket right on one of the lines, just like this. And so you're not gonna cover both lines, right? You're gonna take the line that's closest to the edge and line up your card slot pocket with that, and it should be the exact same width as your lining panel. So I'm gonna grab a couple clips and just clip this in place, and I'm going to sew on one card slot pocket at a time. And you have the little tabs here that overextend up here at the top. They're supposed to be like that. So now we're pretty much just going to trace the top stitching we've already done on the sides, and then we're also going to top stitch along the bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So starting at that second fold again, we're just going to go all the way down, tracing over the stitching along the bottom edge, and then up to the top, stopping there. And this will attach the card slot pockets to the lining. Isn't that cute? Now we have these little card slots on our wallet. It's so cute. I love how this comes together. So we're gonna do the exact same thing with the other side. So you can just flip around your wallet. So the card slots you've already attached are on the bottom. Now take the bottom edge of your remaining card slots and line it up with that marked line. And then the edges should line up perfectly as well. And now let's just clip this in place. Make sure it's all centered. It's not crooked or anything. All right, and once again, we're just gonna trace the side top stitching, and then we're gonna go along the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. That's just going to secure this in place. So after you have these both sewn on, now what we want to do is glue down these edges. So fold it so that it's wrong side up. And starting with the top, we're going to glue a little bit here and then fold down the top corner just like that. So then you should have a little tail over here. And I just kind of add glue everywhere and then fold down that tail spot as well. And then since it's kind of chunky over here, I'm gonna add a clip to hold it in place while the glue dries. So I'm gonna do this for all 4 edges, just starting with the top corner and fold that down. And then with this little wing hanging off over here, I'll fold that in. And then just add a clip. And there you go. This is your inner piece pretty much almost done. So go ahead and set this to the side while the glue dries. Now you're gonna grab your dividers, and each of your dividers should have a piece of interfacing already attached to the back. What we're gonna do is take this divider and fold it in half, right sides together so that the short edges match up. And we're just gonna fold this in half. So you can press along that edge with your fingers. And what we're gonna do is sew along 2 of these 3 raw edges. So the 2 raw edges that have the smaller piece of fabric hanging off the side of our interfacing. Remember the bottom here has that longer piece of fabric that has no interfacing. We're not sewing on that. We're just gonna sew over here on the right and the bottom at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Go ahead and do this for all 4 of your dividers. Okay, once you have these sewn together, cut the corners of the stitched edge. So you have 4 corners here, but you have 1 corner that has stitching on both sides of it. Go ahead and just cut that corner off without cutting the stitches. You're just trimming down the triangle of that edge. Do this for all 4 of them. So now we can take each of these units, flip them so that they are right side out. This is why back stitching was helpful. I always forget to mention this little guy in the beginning of the video, but this is a turning tool, and this will help you a lot with poking out those seams. There are lots of different options for turning tools, but this one is my favorite, and I'll have it linked down below. So you're just going to turn out each of these 4 dividers so they're right side out, and all the corners are nice and straight. So you just have 2 corners you have to kind of poke out, but you just want to make sure that none of them are bunched in, and they're nice and straight. Once you have these all turned out, you can just grab your iron and give it a quick press. This will help flatten it out and make it a little bit easier to work with. Okay, now if you have a directional print, you're going to want to pay attention to this part. You're going to lay your dividers so that they are sewn edge side facing each other. So we're just setting them out like this. Raw edges are facing away from each other. The raw edges are on the outside. The sewn edges are on the inside. If you have a preference on where that seam is down here on the bottom, go ahead and rearrange these so it's the way you want. Now the reason we do this is so that the top stitching, so that the thread that's going through our needle, is on the side that faces out most. So if you don't really care about if you have top stitching or bobbin threads showing, then don't worry about this. But if you do, then just keep this in mind, and these are the tops of each one of our dividers. These are all the tops. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the top and bottom folded edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You don't need to top stitch along this inner folded edge here, just the longer tops and bottoms on each of these 4 dividers. All right, once you have these top stitched, you can take these on your pressing mat or your ironing table and lay them wrong side up. So for me, that's the side that has the bobbin thread showing. And then we're going to grab our iron, and this flap hanging out here that doesn't have any interfacing on it, we're gonna fold it so that it goes to the back side where the bobbin thread is. And then we're just gonna press it. This is just a prep step, so don't worry too much if this confuses you. So we're just gonna press all 4 of these so that that little raw edge flap hugs our interfacing and folds bobbin side together. Again, if you don't care about your bobbin or your top thread and what's showing, then either side will work. You just have to fold the raw flap back. That's all. Okay, then we're gonna kind of open up these folds, and then we're gonna take that raw edge and we're gonna fold it in to the fold we just made. So this raw edge is just coming to the edge of our interfacing right here. We're just gonna fold that in. So we're folding it half as much as we did in the step right before this. And then give it another press with your iron to help hold that. And if it doesn't stay perfectly folded, that's fine. Again, this is just a prep step to help us guide our way through the next step. You could always use a fabric marker too for this instead, because what we really want are those creases. Those creases are gonna help us. So if you don't wanna work with the iron, you could just use a fabric marker here, and that will help guide you. So now grab your lining piece, and your glue should now be dry. And let me just show you essentially what we're doing, because this kind of confused me in the beginning. We're taking our divider and we're going to take the side with the raw edges, and we're just gonna wrap that behind our lining. So those raw edges will get tucked in behind the lining, and then we're just gonna wrap it around like this. So that first fold right here, that innermost fold that's halfway on that uninterfaced piece of fabric, that's what we're gonna line up right on this raw edge here of our lining. So don't go all the way to the edge of the interfacing where that second fold is. We're just going to that first fold. And for the position of this, the top edge should be at the second pocket right here. So that second top stitch fold, it should line right up with that. And then the bottom should line up with the bottom edge of your card slots. If it goes down or above just a little bit, that's okay. But it's gonna line up just like that. And all of them will do this. So you can see, I'm going to take them all off whenever we get to the machine, but I just wanna give you an idea of what this looks like. So we'll tuck all of them in. Again, the raw edge goes behind the lining, and that way we don't have to worry about any of these raw edges. Just like that. And so you can see I have my second fold right here. That's not all the way against the lining, only that first fold is. So second fold is still visible. So working on these one at a time, take one, line it up, top stitch it on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're gonna do this for each of these 4 divider tabs. Alrighty, so here it is stitched on just with the first stitches. If you look at the back, this is what it looks like. Those raw edges are along the back edge. And this next step is going to cover up these raw edges of our card slot pockets. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold our divider over and make sure it's lined up with your card slot pockets. Don't have it angled off like that. Get it lined up with the bottom edges. Use some clips here and clip these in place. Do this for all 4 of them. Okay, so now that these are folded over, we're going to top stitch over the fold at 1/4 inch seam allowance. This can get a little bulky. This is again why we keep everything as thin as possible. But we're going to top stitch along these folded clipped edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end of each one of these. Alrighty, here's your lining. So the only thing left to add after this is the zipper pocket, which we're going to do after we attach this to the exterior. So set this to the side. Alright, so now we're going to attach the zipper. So this is the part where it starts getting a little tricky. I'm gonna guide you through it, okay? First, I suggest having your zipper longer than you think you need it. Now I'm using a plastic zipper tape, so I can cut this to whatever size I want it to be. I'm cutting mine to 18 inches. You could even go longer. This is a very precise pattern, but we do have the ability to trim this down after it's attached if we need to. But if it's too short, that can be a problem. And I will say that I'm pretty sure my zippers the last couple times have been a little too short, and it made some of the steps after this very challenging. Now I'm going to be following the pattern exactly for this. So this is where my little millimeter centimeter ruler comes into play. And I'm going to mark a line that is 1.5 centimeters from the edge of my zipper tape on both sides. And this is just to keep the zipper from falling off. That's all. This is just to prevent the zipper from falling off. So you could even go smaller. You really don't even have to measure this step, honestly. You're just stitching over the teeth so that the zipper doesn't flail off at any point while we're constructing this part of the bag. But I am going to stick with the pattern, and if you didn't have centimeters, you could just do about 1/2 inch here. Okay, I'm gonna take this to the machine now. I'm just gonna stitch over my teeth where my marked lines are. Okay, now I'm gonna take my zipper tape and I'm gonna flip it over so that I'm looking at the wrong side of it. And I'm gonna grab my ruler and a fabric marker, and I'm gonna mark a line along the long edges that is 1/2 centimeter in from these raw edges. And 1/2 centimeter is about 0.2 inches. Alrighty, so I don't know if you can see, but I have 2 of these lines marked on the wrong side of my zipper. That's gonna help with sewing it on. Now, quickly figure out how you want your zipper to go. So whenever you're opening it, do you want it to open from the left to the right when it's facing, with the bag tag facing you? You know, just give that a thought real quick so that it's in your mind. Because what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the right side of our wallet, and we're going to attach our zipper right side down to our wallet. So just think about how you want this to go. So I want my zipper to go from left to right when I'm opening it, but we're going to attach it starting on the bottom. So I'm just going to take my zipper. Right now I have it exactly how I want, going to the left when closed, and I'm going to just fold it down like this because we're going to attach it like this. So it's still going to the left when closed, going to the right when open, but we're going to start from the bottom. Okay, so since I will be starting on the end that is closed, so it's the very end of my zipper, right? This is the part that will be open when I open the zipper. This is the part that will be closed. We're going to mark 6.5 centimeters in from the raw edge. Okay, so here is my end of my zipper. I have it marked 6.5 centimeters in. I'm going to take my zipper, I'm going to lay it right sides together with the right side of my exterior, and it's going to be facing down. I'm going to be working on this bottom edge first. Now that mark that we made at 6.5 centimeters, that's going to line up with the bottom edge of our zipper tab here. And now your zipper is going to come in, so it's not going to start on the edge of your zipper tab. It's going to be lined up with the edge of your exterior. The tabs are for later. Just make sure that marked line is lining up with the bottom edge of that tab over here on the right. And let's grab some clips to hold this in place. All right, so you're going to need your zipper foot for this. And what we're going to do is we're going to start right here at that intersection between the 1 centimeter mark that's along the long edge of our zipper and that 6.5 centimeter mark that's towards the end of our zipper tape. So that little intersection right there. And we're just going to stitch the zipper in place around this bottom curve. We're going to go all the way around until we get to this other bottom edge of this tab. So we're going bottom of tab to bottom of tab, just like that. Go slow. You might find it easier if you open up your zipper. As you get past this part here, open up your zipper. Actually, you can just take your zipper and take it all the way to that open edge over here. Make sure it doesn't go off the edge. And then sew it on like this. That might be a little bit easier for you. Just take it slow as you go around these curves. Use a stiletto and just stay right on that line. So that long line we marked on our zipper tape on the wrong side, that's our stitching line. So just stay on that line with your needle. So I sped that up for the sake of this video, but that took me about 3 minutes. It took me just about 3 minutes to sew on this bottom curve. That's how slow you should be going. I mean, it should take you even longer. This is the 3rd time I'm doing this, so I should be quicker at this rather than if this is your first time. Okay, so where you stopped, right over here on the edge, get your zipper lined up. So if your zipper's open, just tuck it in so that it's nice and straight here. And what you want to do is mark on this other side of the zipper tape where you stopped on the right side. So you can use a ruler for this, or you can just kind of eyeball it and go all the way across your zipper tape, because we're going to need that mark for the next step. We want this to be perfectly lined up. So this is where we're at. If you want, you can just kind of tuck your zipper around to give you a good idea of what it's going to look like. Looking pretty cute. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the remaining zipper tape edge, and we're gonna fold this up. So obviously you have to leave this one down here because it's sewn in place. But again, right sides together, you should take your marks. You have a mark on both edges of your zipper of where you should start and stop. So pick one of them you're gonna start with. I'm gonna pick the edge over here. And we're gonna line up that mark on our zipper tape with the other edge of the zipper tab. So remember, we did this edge over here. Now we're doing the other edge of the zipper tab. So let's clip that in place. And now with this remaining edge, again, zipper right side down, we're going to just sew along that long marked line all the way around the edges. And hopefully, once we get to the other edge of this little tab over here, that's also where our marked line will be that's on the other edge of our zipper tape. If it's a little off, don't worry about it. Just do your best. There we go. First part of zipper install is done. So if you want to just kind of flip this out, you have to kind of push that zipper pull through that gap. Flip the zipper out and fold it. It's always good to do a little fit test here. So you kind of have to finagle this. It will get easier as we get through construction, don't worry. So in the end, these little zipper tapes over here on the edge will be tucked in. Go all the way around. Now she mentions in the pattern exactly how this should fit. If this is your first time especially, don't stress out too much about it. Mine's definitely not perfect, but you'll still be very proud of what you made in the end. So don't worry too much if the fit's not perfect. So now we're going to do some clipping and some prepping for the real hard step. And now, this wasn't it. This wasn't the hard step. It was tricky, but it wasn't the hard step. Okay, so for this next step, now we're going to address these little tabs over here. So take your tab and fold it wrong sides together. Just fold it to the back. Use a clip to hold that in place. Do this for the other side as well. Okay, so now what I did is I marked little tick marks, and this is a 4 centimeter gap. So I used my ruler, and I lined up the 2 centimeter mark right here on the center of this opening. And then I just marked a mark at the 4 centimeter and the 0. So I have 4 centimeter gap here marked. And that's what I'm going to top stitch. So we're top stitching more than just the length of this tab. So this is similar to what we did with the lining. We're just going to top stitch along these little edges here, 4 centimeters long at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you're catching this tab back here. If you need to, you might find it easiest to grab some tape and tape those tabs down so you don't have to worry about them kind of popping up behind the wallet while you're sewing it. So look, I'll just wrap it nice and tight and then tape it. All right, let's take this to the sewing machine and top stitch it. All right, this is one of those situations where you're going to want to leave those tails nice and long, and we're going to pull them through to the back and tie them so we don't have any messy top stitching marks here on the front. So just flip this over. If you use tape, go ahead and remove it. And now using that bobbin thread, just gently tug on that bobbin thread, and that should pull a little loop of your top thread up, and then you can use a stiletto or a pin to pull that thread to the back. So do this for all 4 of your bobbin and top thread pairs. All right, there we go. Now we're just gonna tie knots with each one of these pairs. So I tie about three knots here on each one just to make sure it stays really well. All right, and then you can just cut these tails off. You can definitely burn the ends of the tails as well. Doing that kind of helps the polyester thread melt a little bit so that knot becomes just like a nice little glob that you don't really have to worry about unraveling. But I think my knots are secure enough. All right, now just to keep these little tabs down, we're going to use some of our fabric glue, and we're just going to glue the back of the tab. So I glue the back of each layer of the tab. So I have the layer of quilt cotton here. I'm going to glue that to the stabilizer, and then I'm going to glue the other side of the quilt cotton and the back of the vinyl and glue that together as well. So add some glue and then add a clip so that it stays flat and it glues itself to the back of the stabilizer. We just want everything nice and tucked in here. We're going to be using quite a bit of glue on this step to prep for the next one. All right, so now what we want to do is take the ends of our zipper tape and we want to attach them together on the back side of our stabilizer. You see, just like this. This is going to make sure that these little ends don't come popping out on the sides over here. Now this is why I kept my zipper tape a little bit longer than it suggested, because if it's a little short here, you end up with kind of a bowl and that gets very tricky. But this does need to be tight. So these angles right here, when the zipper tape comes down from the side and goes into the back, it has to be 90 degrees. You don't want anything pushing out. You want this to be really, really tight. So it shouldn't bowl up a bunch, but it should be very, very tight. Now you could definitely use staplers here. Here, I have a little stapler here. Let's try that. I've always hand stitched this, but since we have enough overhang, we might be able to do this. And even then, staplers might just be good to just hold it in place until I can hand stitch it. So there we go. Now it's nice and tight there. I am still going to hand stitch it just to make sure I don't have any problems. This would be very difficult to machine stitch because you have so much stuff pulling around. So you can staple it. If you have any other sort of method you like to attach it, hand stitching works well too. I know a lot of us shy away from hand sewing. And I understand, but this is a very small amount. So I'm just threading a needle, any kind of sewing needle. Just any sort of needle that you can put thread through and it's sharp on the end and it will go through the zipper tape. So I'm just threading it and then I take the ends, wrap them around. And then all you have to do is knot the bottom of the thread so it's double folded. Just knot the bottom however is easiest for you. And then I'm just going to quickly go back and forth through the zipper tape. Remember, the ends of zipper tape like to fray, so don't count on, you know, very, very edge of zipper tape to very, very edge of zipper tape to hold this together because they can fray. So that's why I like some overlap here. And I am just doing this super messy, going all over the place. The goal is not to have this look pretty. The goal is that the zipper stays together. That's it. Now I'm not going to leave these staples in back here. The only reason is because if this wallet somehow got left out in the rain, got really wet or anything like that, I would be worried that those eventually could start to rust. And then, especially since I'm using quilt cotton, that rust will show on the lining. And I don't want to have to worry about that. So I am going to remove these staples. All right, once you're done, just tie a little knot to secure it. So I just wrap it under some other stitches and then loop the needle through the hole. It's very, very messy. Again, that's fine. It's secure. That's what's important. And now I'm just going to turn it over and remove these staples. All right, once your zipper's ready, now go to these curved edges along the tops of our panels and very gently clip into the seam. Don't get too close to the thread, so you don't want to actually touch the thread with your scissors. But we're just going to cut like halfway through the seam. This is just going to help those corners spread out a little bit more. So do this for all 4 of your corners. And now we want to add some glue because we want these corners to stay down and not give us any trouble when we're attaching the lining. So just like we did on the tabs over here, we're just going to add a little bit of glue. I'm just going to add it to the interfacing here. And then I'll push that down. And I'm going to add some clips as well to hold that fabric down while the glue dries. So that's what one corner looks like. Go ahead and do that for all 4 of these corners. And so the edges that I find the most difficult here to keep down are right here where the vinyl is. So I'm going to add some glue there as well. And see if that will help. Because that vinyl is so bulky, it pushes up. So I'm just going to add some glue and clip that vinyl down. All right, once you're this far, just stop, take a break, let this dry, and then we're going to get to the hard part. All right, so once your glue is dry, take off clips. And it's not always perfect. Things don't stay down perfect, but that's okay. The goal here is we just want these raw edges of our zipper tape to not peek through on the lining side. That's the goal. So here is where we're at, looking very cute. Now for the hardest part, grab your lining, and what we're gonna do is we're pretty much just gonna top stitch the lining inside just like that. It's a little tricky, we're gonna do one side at a time. So let's just start with this top edge here. Take your lining and kind of nestle it in there. And you want it to cover all of your stitching. So you can see I have some stitching over here on the side peeking through. In the end, if some of your stitches show, you're gonna be fine. You're not gonna notice it. So right now, you'll notice it a ton if some of your stitches are showing that's from the zipper tape. But in the end, you won't. So I just want you to remember that. So just nestle it in here. Yes, this side is too short. Don't worry about that. We're not focused on that right now. We're just worried about this half right here. So we're going to add some clips to hold it all together. And in the picture, she flips the zipper out like that. This, as much as I know some of you guys don't want to hear it, this is just one of those steps that gets easier the more you do it. So the first time you do this, it could be very, very challenging. It was for me. It definitely was for me. I mean, this is the third time I'm doing it, and it's probably still going to be very challenging for me. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. There we go. So I'm just applying it to half of it. Again, you can see this down here. Don't focus on that. We're going to deal with that later. We're just worried about this. Now, the hard thing. We're going to flip this over, and we're going to top stitch around this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the front side, which means we don't see the lining, which means it is possible you will not catch the lining. So we have to be very careful with this as we go around. We're going to be checking this a lot. And we're going to do 1/8 of an inch starting at one of the ends. Remember we did that little 4 centimeter top stitching here on the side? Starting at one of those ends, we're going to go around the entire wallet at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Maybe go just a little bit bigger than 1/8 of an inch just to make sure you catch. You don't want to be right on the edge of your fabric because then you might not catch the lining. So it's always better to go a little bit bigger just so you know you do catch that lining. And just go slow. All right, here we go. So we did catch the lining, which is great. You can see here, I don't know if you can see on the side, there is some stitching showing right there, but we did catch the edge of that zipper tape, so I don't have the raw edges of the zipper tape poking out, which is good. Now remember, so right now, again, that's really noticeable, and it's like, girl, it's crazy, but when this is all tucked in, remember, this wallet doesn't open flat, okay? This wallet only opens about this much. You're not going to notice that. You're just not. So don't give yourself a hard time if this isn't perfect. You can see I left the tails again. I did not backstitch. Once again, we're going to pull this bobbin thread up and then pull the top thread to the lining side. And a stiletto is easiest for that. There you go. Or just a pin, just a needle, whatever. And then we're going to tie this in a double or triple knot. That's going to keep the exterior nice and clean. Yes, you're going to have a little tiny knot down here. You will not notice it. This is just one of those projects where you're going to notice a lot of imperfections while you're making it, but you're not really going to see those when you're done. So I don't want you to ever stop and say, bah, this is too hard and I don't like how it looks right now, so I'm not going to do it. Don't do that. Just finish it. Even if you hate how it looks right now, just finish it. So then we trim down the tails after we've knotted it. And this is where you can grab a lighter and very gently just burn those tails, and that will pretty much just hide it, which is great. So do the same thing on the other side. Alrighty, halfway done. We got to do this side now. This side is a little bit more challenging, and this is why it was challenging for me, because in my head I wanted this flat. So I was pulling and I was like, this doesn't go. It doesn't stay flat. It's not going to stay flat. The wallet curves like this, which means you're going to have to sew it like this. Now, honestly, I think it'd probably be easiest to top stitch from the lining side, because then you can see more of what you're doing. It curves up, so you can kind of go around like this at the machine, but then your bobbin thread is going to be seen on the exterior, and you're not really going to see where it goes on the exterior. So it's totally up to you. If you're using a bobbin thread that matches your fabric perfectly, and it's really not going to be noticeable, definitely top stitch from the lining side, because it will be easier. Since I'm not in that position, I'm going to top stitch from the top, which is just a little bit more challenging. So once again, we're going to flip these zipper teeth away. This is where that glue comes in real handy, because it will keep all those edges down. And I'm going to start with the corners, just clipping the corners in place. And you can see this is folded. It is not flat. It is folded. You know what? Hold that side. Before we do this, let's prep our zipper. I totally forgot about that. So we have our little zipper down here, and it needs to stay down there until we're done. This is where you're going to want to grab that really strong, bright colored thread. Give yourself a nice, 15-inch long piece. Now you're going to take your thread and you're going to thread it through your zipper pull. There should be some hole somewhere in your zipper pull you can thread this through. And then tie it off really, really well. Okay. Nice strong knot. There we go. So now your zipper, your little zipper pull down here, you're going to tuck it all the way in like that. Tuck the pull down so you're not going to, go over it with your needle. Make sure your thread is hanging off the edge though. This is how we're going to yank that zipper pull out once we're done. All right, so now go back to this and clip your lining so that it covers the stitches on the back of your zipper tape. All right, here we go. This is challenging. It is challenging because now we got to go to the sewing machine and we got to top stitch around this and it's curved up. So it is challenging. So we're just going to do our best here to keep everything in place so that it doesn't shift on us. The hardest thing is starting out. So I'm going to start over here on the left. And if you saw before, what I do is I crank my wheel so that I manually put the needle exactly where I want it to start. So I'm going to have it start right in this seam that we already have, or right in these stitches we already have that we did on the edge over here for the tabs. I'm going to stick my needle right in there, and what I do is I lift this up and I make sure the needle caught the lining. So I just peek over on the side, make sure that needle caught the lining, and as long as that needle is in exactly where I need it, in the lining where I want it, then I'm good, because now everything's going to stay together. But if while I'm doing this, everything shifts, and then my needle is poking through the exterior, but my lining is all over the place, we don't want to start like that. So just take the time to make sure your needle is exactly where it needs to be, going through all the layers, and then slowly continue, and you should be good. It does take practice though. Alrighty, that was a hard one. It was. That one was challenging for me too. I was struggling. I don't know if you noticed, but I did go off the edge of my lining. So I went ahead and just pulled the thread back a little bit, just kind of unwound it. And then I started again and went around. Yes, you can see some of these stitching. It's okay. So now all the little places where I have threads, I'm going to knot them and then burn them so that I don't have to worry about any of this unraveling. So again, I do think it would be easier to sew from the lining side. You just won't have much control over how it looks on the exterior. But that's the struggle with projects sometimes, is that we need it structurally to work on one side, but we need it to look the best on the other side. So it's like, which one do you focus on? You decide. Use a thread color that matches your exterior fabric. Also use a thread color that matches your lining. Do your best to do that, and then I think you would be in much better shape, especially when you're practicing this. So now what we want to do is pull out the zipper. So we're going to gently pull on this string to get it started. Now the string can break, and then the size of your zipper pull could have something to do here. So just kind of pinch this edge and then wiggle that zipper out. And this can be tricky, just have some patience. And just keep wiggling. There we go. All right, got the zipper out. Now I can cut my green string. Alrighty, now, moment of truth. Let's see what it looks like. Oh yeah. Doesn't that look cute? Such a cute wallet. Is it perfect? No. But will it look pretty dang perfect when it's all done? Yeah, it will. I mean, look at that. That's beautiful. Even with all the mistakes, even when you open it up, and again, this won't even open this far because we're going to put a pocket in here. This will just open this far. You just won't see the stitching from the back of the zipper, or maybe a raw edge here or there. Like, you're just not going to see it, and it's still structural. It still works. It's very, very cute. And you will have a gap right here. That is supposed to be like that. So that gap stays. Don't worry about that. Okay, go ahead and set this to the side. The hardest part is done. Now we're just going to add the little zipper pocket inside, and we're finished. That was the hardest part. No matter what happened, finish this wallet, okay? Let's finish it. All right, so grab your little zipper pocket pieces, and I'm gonna cut a strip of tape. I cut my tape longer than it needs to be, and then I trim it down, so. This tape is number 5 zipper tape. You wanna use number 3. Number 5 will work though. And then I have a pretty large zipper pull for this. I'm using all the wrong stuff. Hopefully you have better stuff. But I just want to show you that even if you use the big zipper tape, the big zipper pull, it still works out. It's still adorable. It's just a little bit easier with smaller stuff. Okay, so let's lay out all of our pieces. We have 2 pieces of our zipper panels that have no interfacing and 2 pieces that have that non-woven interfacing on there. First thing we're going to do is just mark the top midpoint for 4 of these pieces, and then we're also going to mark the midpoint of our zipper. So to do that, all you have to do is just fold it in half, short sides together. Grab a marking tool, whatever you want, and just mark it. All right, so grab one of your pieces with the interfacing and lay it right side up. Take your zipper and we can lay it right side down. You can have the zipper facing whichever way you want. If that's important to you, think about it now, but we can flip this around before we put it in the wallet, so it's not that big of a deal right now. So then we're gonna lay our zipper right side down, and we're gonna match up the midpoint on the zipper tape with that midpoint on the top edge of our zipper pocket. And then grab your clips and clip these together. And make sure you're using a zipper foot when attaching this. So now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're just basting this in place right now. So now with your zipper facing wrong side up, grab one of your zipper pocket pieces that does not have interfacing on it and lay it right side down along the back of your zipper tape, matching up those midpoint marks. And then just clip it to the edge of the zipper tape where you've already basted it in place. Now we can sew along this edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or you can go 3/8 of an inch if you're using a bigger zipper tape like I am. Totally up to you. Alrighty, now I like to top stitch these one at a time. So we're gonna flip both of these panels wrong sides together. And I like to grab some clips to hold the bottom edges together just to make sure it all stays nice and squared up. And then I'm just going to finger press along this edge. You can definitely press it with an iron if you'd like, but since it's so small, just pushing it down with your fingers should be good. And now I'm just going to stitch right along the top of my fabric at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold this down so it never gets caught in the zipper. I'm not sure if I recorded that. I apologize if I didn't record that. We'll show it on the next one. Okay, so now let's do the other side of the zipper. So once again, grab your zipper panel that has the interfacing on the back of it and lay it right side up. Take your zipper, and we're going to lay the zipper right side down, and we're working on the opposite raw edge now. Line up those midpoint marks, and then just clip along that top edge. There we go. Now we're just going to baste along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, now with the zipper wrong side up, take your last piece for your zipper pocket, and we're going to lay it right side down, once again matching that midpoint with the midpoint on your zipper tape. And it should line up with all the other pockets. There we go. Now let's sew along this edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now take both of those loose pieces of fabric and fold them wrong sides together. And I find it easiest if you line up the bottom raw edges, clip those so that they're held together, and you can just kind of tug on them and then flatten out the edge right next to the zipper. And now let's top stitch along that edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, how cute is that? Okay, so now we're going to flip the 2 pieces that have interfacing right sides together and then clip along their bottom raw edges. And then take the 2 pieces of fabric that don't have the interfacing and clip those together to hold in place along their bottom raw edges. And now we're going to sew along both of these clipped edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those edges sewn, now we're just going to flip the whole thing right side out. So go ahead and pull apart the zipper ends. Just flip it all right side out. Make sure the pieces with the interfacing are on the outside, and then the looser pieces are on the inside. And you can press this with an iron if it makes it easier. But it is such a small piece, you could just finger press this. And what we're going to do is we're trying to straighten out these raw edges on the side really well. We're going to keep them raw. We're not going to finish these off because they will be tucked into the little dividers in just a moment. So we're just going to clip along this edge, get it all lined up. There we go. I'm just adding clips to the short edges. I'm gonna give it a good finger press on the bottom. There we go. It's a small pocket, but it is adorable. So now we're gonna sew along each of these short edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And here's the thing, I don't really like sewing over zipper teeth when they're on their side like this. This is a very dense piece here. The needle can break when it hits it. So I sew all the way up to it, and maybe I'll like manually crank it over the edge of it. But pretty much I'm just gonna sew from the bottom all the way right underneath the teeth, and I'm gonna back stitch in the bottom and the top on both sides. All right, if you have a longer zipper like I do, go ahead and trim that down now so it's all just one cute little tiny zipper. All right, so now we gotta add this to the wallet. So figure out which way you want your zipper to go when it's closed. I'm gonna have both of my zipper pulls kind of be on the same side when closed. So I'm gonna go ahead and open in my little wallet. Look how cute that is. And then we're gonna flip those dividers out. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna snuggle this zipper right in the middle. Okay, so open up your zipper for your wallet and pull the dividers out so they're like this. Now take your divider edges and line them up perfectly. Grab some clips to hold those in place. Do this on both sides. It should be perfect angles lined up with one another. Nothing wonky here. All right, now we're gonna sew along both of these clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, this is what you should have, your little wallet with wings, right? How cute is this? Oh, it's so cute. Okay, so now we're just going to take our zipper and just kind of plop it in here. So what you're gonna do is take your zipper and starting on the left side, we're just gonna tuck it all the way in to that sewn edge of our dividers. So just slide it in there. If you want it a little bit higher, a little bit lower, figure out exactly how you want it. There we go. But just really make sure it's tucked in there. And then I'm gonna grab some clips to make sure it doesn't move on me. Now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge here on the left at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you top stitch at the bottom and the top. You could do a second row of stitching if you'd like, but one row should be fine. And you see how, this is the open end of my zipper. You see how I have the zipper teeth overlapping, one is higher than the other. That will make it so that I can sew over this without worrying about breaking my needle. Okay, we have the left side sewn in. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna move our zipper all the way over to the right. So just pull it all the way over. There we go. And then tuck it in to the divider on this side. You might have to really yank it down here on the bottom. Just pull it as hard as you can to get it all the way to the edge. If you have to kind of smush down the divider, that's okay. And then also on this side, I am going to twist my zipper so that I'm not sewing through 2 layers of teeth stacked up. So I'm going to twist it so that it's more flat against one side of the dividers, and that way I can sew over it without having to worry about breaking my needle. And just like we did on the other side, we're gonna sew along this short clipped edge here at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once that's sewn in place, just tuck this in, center your zipper, give it all a good press. That interfacing that we have on those dividers is paper-like, so it will stay nice and creased like that. And look at this adorable zipper wallet. You're done. Now, and again, I want you to remember, this looked really rough. There were steps that did not look very good, and it's easy to quit at those steps, but I want you to continue. Yeah, I've got some pretty weird looking top stitching right here, but you don't even notice it. When you look at the rest of the wallet, it all just looks so cute. I mean, it doesn't, you're just not going to see those little imperfections in the end. Look at this. Adorable. Adorable. All right, are you ready to see your finished wallet? Look how cute this is. I love this fabric so much. I mean, look at those roses. I love how they're just dripping around it. We used a brown vinyl. I didn't want to take too much away from how cool this fabric is, so I wanted a more neutral vinyl. Nice, pretty pink zipper, easy open. Oh, and then we have that beautiful floral on the inside. Look at how that pops. Isn't that adorable? I love this wallet so, so much. This is one of those wallets that you're gonna make and it will be used until it's falling apart. I mean, this is a wallet this is a perfect first wallet, especially think about it if you have like a younger person in your life, like they're 14 or 15 or 16, but they're just starting to like need to carry their money and they're gonna be out and about. This is a great wallet for younger people. It's also a great wallet for traveling. I know for when I travel, I don't really like to carry a big bag. I carry a small bag and I try to just put as much as I can in it, but I try to make everything small, you know, like I need my phone and my backup charger and my wallet, but I don't want big stuff. So this is perfect for that. Love this wallet so, so much. Thank you so much to Miss Freckles Designs for allowing me to film a tutorial for this. It was so fun. If you make this wallet and you post it on social media, please make sure you tag me and you also tag Miss Freckles Designs. We want to see your version. If you have any questions at all, leave them down in the comment section. I want to know how it's going. I want to know how it's going. And I want you to finish it. That's the biggest thing. Finish your wallet. Hashtag finish your wallet. We'll make it a thing, okay? You gotta do it, and then I wanna see it. So thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.